Hi there, welcome to Kneppy Invest. Change. Some people hate change. They hate change with a passion. They just want things to remain the way they are. And I think, in my opinion, it would be horrible to have that mindset because the world is changing at a rapid pace. And I think if you can't adapt to change, you're going to be left behind. So I actually do like change. And I would love to see how much change is going to happen over the next 100 years. I'd love to be alive in 2121 just to see what the world's going to be like. So I thought I'm really open to change, and today I have opened up my mind and I'm trying something new. And the reason why I'm trying something new with this video is because of a question I was asked in a comment in one of my other videos, and the answer to that comment was quite involved and would take a little bit of time. So I thought I'm not going to answer it in that comment section, and I was thinking, how can I answer it? Then I just came back, maybe I can do a video on it. And then it just evolved, that thought, into maybe doing a whole Q&A video series where I get questions in the comment section, answers those questions in a video. So that's what I'm doing today, trying the first Q&A with Kneppy Invests. One of the benefits of doing this Q&A video series would be I can streamline all the questions and answers I get in the comment sections of the videos. So I do get quite a few questions and requests to look at companies in the comment section, and it is actually quite daunting at times to get all these questions, and I have to answer those questions as best I can. I don't always get to it, and I am falling quite a bit behind. So if I can sort of streamline, that's a more effective use of my time in the future. So my hope for this is, if you do have a question, if you do have a request, leave it in the comment section of this video, and I'll do the best I can to answer any questions or comments I get in future Q&A videos. Now, depending on how many I get, unfortunately or fortunately, I might not be able to answer every single question I get. So that's my hope. So if you do have a question or a request, can you please leave it in the comment section of this video? So this is the question that led me down on this path to doing this Q&A video. I have been thinking about doing a video along these lines for quite a while, but this question has just given me this extra push to go down this path. So the question from Sensei Sifu Shredder, and the first thing I think of when I see that name is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I have no idea why. I'm not even an expert on that show. I can't even name the turtles, Raffaello or something. Anyway, Kneppy, what is your background and origin story? What did you do for work, whether you went to university and what you studied, and what made you get into investing? So those are very legitimate, good questions. And if I was following someone who's doing YouTube finance videos, those are the sort of things I would want to know. So I'm going to answer most of those questions in this video. So to know me, and really to know anyone, you really have to know where they grew up. So I grew up on the mid-north coast of New South Wales. I was born in Parramatta, that's in Sydney, for those who don't know. My parents then moved to Taree when I was 2 or 3, and that's where I grew up. So I lived there for 16 years. I went to primary school, high school there. Now, I was at the University of Oklahoma, which I'll get into later in this video, and one of the professors there mentioned that the mid-north coast of New South Wales has one of the best climates in the world. And when I thought about it, when he said that, I thought back and I went, he's probably right. I haven't lived in, all around the world, but then I thought of my youth. I thought about the sort of weather we experienced during the winter. It never got too cold, didn't have snow, all those nasty winter weather you can get in most places in the world. And then during the summer, not too hot, not too humid like you do get in Queensland. You don't get tropical cyclones all the way down there. You do get thunderstorms, and occasionally you get these east coast lows and occasional flooding. Even not a lot of droughts, not really a lot of bad droughts. So you do get a little bit of rainfall there. So I think what he said was mostly true, but again, I can't really say if it's one of the best climates in the world, but it's definitely one of the best climates I've lived in the world. So it's very interesting to hear that from someone on the other side of the world. Now, our parents now have moved to Harrington, just right on the coast at the mouth of the Manning River, a lovely little town. Not much growth in that town because it's surrounded to the north by a national park, and to the south you've got the river. So a wonderful area in the world and a great place to grow up. But when I was growing up in Taree, all you want to do is get out of the area. And now, as I've grown older, I've come to think of that area with a more fondness. Now, I do have quite a few interests, but they're not really pertinent to investing. But something that was pertinent to investing was my interest in numbers. And I do have a story where I was sitting looking out the window, because we did live on a main street, just counting the cars go past. 1, 2. Wasn't interested in the cars, I was just interested in the numbers. 1, 2, 3. And then at one point I was counting up by 3, 3, 6, 9, 12. And I just kept on going. And I was just interested in numbers for some reason. And that's carried on through to the present. I'm still really interested in numbers. When I moved to the United States, I lived there for 8 years, and I'll get into that in a second or so. I really started to like baseball, not so much because of the play, just because it's such a statistically about sport. I mean, there's statistics about everything you can do in baseball. Same thing with a lot of other sports. I've gotten into fantasy sports, and that's all about numbers. And when you think about investing, it's all about numbers, and it's all about searching for patterns, looking at numbers and manipulating, maybe not manipulating in a bad way, but just manipulating numbers, looking at financial statements. Every single day the price of a company goes up and down. It's just all about numbers, and that's one of the driving forces for me to actually get into investing. Now, I did have quite a few interests, so numbers was one interest. So you can do a lot of sort of different degrees with numbers. Actuarial, accounting was definitely at play there. I also had a fairly high interest in weather, so some sort of atmospheric science degree was a possibility as well. I eventually enrolled at the University of Newcastle and to do economics. I'm not sure why, not even sure what my plan was back then. I did finish that degree in 1996, but even as I was finishing that degree in 1996, I do remember looking at weather books and thinking how I can actually do some sort of meteorological degree, and we'll see how that plays out in the next few slides. So after I received my economics degree, I applied at the Macquarie University in Sydney to do an atmospheric science degree. And as I started doing that, I think I was there for maybe 3 or 4 weeks. And then after 3 or 4 weeks, I went, nah, I can't do this any longer. I need a job. I need to earn some money first, and maybe I can do that in the future. So my first real job was with the Commonwealth Bank, very cliche for someone with an economics degree. Now, I worked in an operations centre, so I wasn't in a branch, and I just had to make sure that branches were following the law. For instance, they had to report any cash transactions above $10,000, so I made sure they did that sort of thing. I did not like working with the Commonwealth Bank. I believed at the time, they could have changed, but at the time, the whole focus was on money, that sort of thing, and I believed the main thing for managers is to make sure the employees are happy, because a happy employee is a significantly more productive employee. I think a lot of companies now, particularly the top companies, have that sort of mindset, which is really good to see. But even where I'm working now, managers don't have that mindset. So I did not like working for the Commonwealth Bank, and I knew I had to leave. So I decided to leave Commonwealth Bank and go on the next stage of my life. So I left Commonwealth Bank, and obviously the next thing I was thinking of doing was going overseas, getting real life experience living in an overseas country. Spent all my time in Australia. Now, my dad originally came from the United States, so I did have American citizenship. So obviously that was the first port of call because I had that citizenship behind me. A lot of people from Australia go to England, and that's usually their experience living overseas. I went to the United States, and I was thinking at the time, what can I do over there? And the first thing that popped up was being a camp counselor at a summer camp. So this was back in the summer of 1998. Went through the whole process, and I got a job at a camp called Camp Beckett in the Berkshires of Massachusetts, and I went there in June of 1998. So I won't spend much time on what happened at the camp, but I did become friends with quite a few other people, particularly from England and Australia. So all those people from England and Australia had work visas and they had to leave the country by a certain time. So we decided to travel around the country over a month or 6 weeks of period. And we bought 2 cars because there was about 7 of us and the cars were fairly cheap. And I still remember the first time I drove on the opposite side of the road. It was on a major freeway and you learn very quickly when that happens. So I have no problems going back over there and learning to, or fearing to drive on the opposite side of the road. But as we moved or travelled across the country, visit all the landmarks, all the national parks, we got to LA and they all had to leave the country because of their work visas. And eventually I was left with one of the cars. And I was all by myself and I decided to travel from LA to Phoenix. As I was traveling there, I noticed or heard that there was a hurricane moving towards LA into the Gulf of Mexico. And eventually over the next few days, I was driving fairly leisurely across Arizona into New Mexico. And I got to El Paso. And then I heard this hurricane was moving straight towards New Orleans, Hurricane George, back in 1998, September. So I decided to drive from El Paso to New Orleans in one day. So this is the drive I did in that one day. 1,092 miles, which is 1,600 kilometers. So according to Google Maps, it should take you 16 hours. And it did take me 16 hours. I remember leaving El Paso. Now at the point in time, I had no money, so wasn't living in or staying in motels. I was actually, it was a station wagon, so I put down the back seat and that's where I would sleep at a rest stop on the main highway. So I remember waking up, it was about 6 a.m. and I decided to drive all the way to New Orleans. And I got to New Orleans just after midnight. I drove through Houston at rush hour, massive thunderstorms rolling through. As I moved or drove into Louisiana and was driving towards New Orleans, it was like one of those disaster movies where everyone's driving out of the city on one side of the road. And the other side of the road, there is no one driving. It was exactly like that in the middle of the night. I still remember it quite clearly. I was the only person driving into New Orleans. Now at the time I was fairly ignorant and I didn't realize or know that New Orleans is the worst place you could be if it's struck by a hurricane. I had no idea. Now at that time I got into New Orleans and I was walking around New Orleans. The hurricane was heading straight up the Mississippi. There was a forecast movement to hit New Orleans. I noticed that the levees protecting New Orleans from the Mississippi River were elevated. I can see ships that were higher than me floating on the river. And I went, that can't be good. So they were evacuating a lot of people to the main stadium there. I found eventually a parking lot and I got to like the 10th floor of the parking lot. People who owned the parking lot said, you can stay in your car, that's okay. Fortunately, the hurricane was heading straight for New Orleans, but a few hours before it was supposed to hit, it actually deviated from its forecast path, and instead of hitting New Orleans, hit Biloxi and Gulfport in Mississippi instead, which is just to the east of New Orleans. Now, that meant New Orleans was on the good side of the hurricane. So actually, there are bad and good sides of hurricanes and tropical cyclones. It's all based off the airflow around it. So in the northern hemisphere, the airflow is counterclockwise or anti-clockwise. So you want the winds coming from your north. So that's where you get actually less wind speed. You don't get the flood surge either. On the eastern side, with winds coming over the Gulf of Mexico or onshore, that's where you get the worst conditions. So with the hurricane moving to the west of New Orleans, that means the best conditions were in New Orleans. So ended up being fairly good conditions, not that bad, and I was able to leave New Orleans fairly quickly. I did run out of gas along the road between New Orleans and Baton Rouge. Not many gas stations were open, but thankfully, to the kindness of strangers, someone gave me a lift or a tow to the nearest gas station and I was okay. I didn't have a lot of money, so I think I actually at one point did phone up my parents so they could forward me some money. I then drove from New Orleans all the way to New Jersey where my sister lived, and I made some serious life decisions at that point in time. Now, I didn't really have much choices here because my mind was really made up. I really wanted to try this atmospheric science or meteorology path that I sort of failed when I went to Macquarie University, and I decided to sit for the SATs, which is the admission test you have to do to go to universities in the United States. I did really well on the SATs, so then I applied for some universities there, And the one university that really popped out to me was one university I've never heard of before, and that was the State University of New York in Brockport, a very small town just to the west of Rochester, New York, and just to the east of Buffalo, New York, which is probably the more famous city in that area. Niagara Falls is in that location, and you can see Toronto, which is just to the northwest of Lake Ontario. So one of the things that really attracted me to Brockport, apart from they did have a meteorology degree, is that it was just to the south of Lake Ontario and does experience lake effect snow. So many of you probably have never heard of lake effect snow, but it is an amazing experience or amazing weather phenomenon that is only experienced when you have some sort of large water mass particularly to the downstream side or upstream side of you. So what happens in lake effect snow in this area is you get these very cold air masses coming over the relatively warm lakes, and it just produces prodigious amounts of snow. In one 3-day event, we had 4 feet of snow in those 3 days. And to experience that when I grew up in a town which experiences no snow at all was amazing. So I just loved it. I loved the winters in Rochester or Brockport because the amount of snow. Eventually I did become a little bit sick of it towards the end of one winter, but the summers there were glorious, wonderful summers. Doesn't get too hot because the air is modified by the lakes to the north. So great weather, great climate for me because I love the winters, I love the snow. A lot of people move out of this area, go to Florida because they don't like the cold of the winter. So I stayed there for 2.5 years getting my degree in meteorology. I studied really hard, worked at the library there, and the main thing was getting very good grades because my main goal was to go to graduate school and eventually get a PhD. So the next logical step after getting my undergraduate degree in meteorology at Brockport was to go to graduate school. So I did the GRE, which is the graduate examination you need to apply for graduate school. Did really well on the GRE. So I applied to 3 universities, University of Oklahoma, Washington in Seattle, and Penn State. I was also recruited by Georgia Tech, which was a bit of an ego boost to be recruited by a university based off my GRE scores. I decided to go to University of Oklahoma simply because of the weather. They get really good thunderstorms there. And I still remember driving into Oklahoma City. There was a massive thunderstorm nearby, and I just loved it. It was quite hot though, so it does get hot there. Now, I still also remember the first time I drove into Oklahoma, I had to pay a toll, and I could not understand a word the toll collector said. So very thick accent in the small towns of Oklahoma. But once you get to the big cities, everyone speaks with this sort of generic American accent. So I did spend about 4 years at the University of Oklahoma. I had some great times, some great experiences. I spent a bit of time as an intern at an energy company on the largest trading floor west of Chicago in the United States. I also spent about 4 months doing a research project in Juneau, Alaska with NCAR and FAA to do with turbulence. That was over the winter months as well. So amazing times there, a lot of experiences. My main goal was to get a PhD though. And after about a year, I realized the sort of personality you need to get a PhD was not me. So you need a lot of patience and persistence. I did not have that. And I'll get into that later in this video. Now, one of the things I did do was an intern, as I mentioned before, at an energy company. And that energy company was a company called Williams in Tulsa. And the main thing I remember when I was there in 2002, from about May to August, was the share price drop. And this was about 6 to 8 months after Enron. So if you remember Enron, that was in late 2001, early 2002. And the share price in Williams dropped from $18 to $1. And they were in financial stress. And at that time, it was extraordinary because I was on a training floor. So it was the largest training floor west of Chicago. And by the time I left, almost everyone I worked with was fired. And the company was saved by Buffett. Now, I'll get into that in the next slide. But at the time, I remember when the share price got to $1, I was thinking to myself, if only I had some money to buy some Williams shares because I had no doubt the company was going to be saved, which it was, and the share price was going to be significantly higher in the future. So that was at $1. And a few years ago, I just decided to look at the chart of Williams, and this is the chart. The high in the share price was $60 back in 2014. So I could have made a mozza if I had the money to buy Williams. I wish I had a little bit of money. Even $1,000 would have made a fair bit. So this is the chart of Williams, and it was just amazing the share price drop when I was there. They always mention how much of the family there were, but then they fired everyone. I don't think you do that with family members, do you? So yeah, Buffett saved Williams. So this article from the New York Times, written by Andrew Ross Sorkin, which I just found out that he is one of the co-creators of the TV show Billions, which I absolutely love. So Warren Buffett, in this article, it's mentioned that he was going to invest $500 million to save Williams, and also some banks were going to put in some funds as well. And Warren Buffett and the banks were going to introduce $3.4 billion of financing to help stave off bankruptcy for Williams. So Williams almost got to that point of being ruined, but you can see what happens when those finances come in, saves a company. You can see what happens with the share price. Share price went from $1 to a high of, was it $60, did I say? Only 15 years later. So sometimes it's best to buy in when a company is under real good financial stress. The only problem is it could go into bankruptcy. So sometimes to get that really high reward, you have to take a bit of high risk. After graduating from the University of Oklahoma, I decided to move back to Australia. So I spent 8 years in the United States. And when I moved back to Australia, it was like a whole different world. It's really weird how your whole perceptions change when you live in a different country outside of Australia for a while. Anyway, so I decided to apply for some jobs. I just sent my resume to Weather News in Sydney. They had a little branch there, and they liked the resume, and they got in contact with Weather News head office in Japan, and we all started to talk, and they decided to offer me a job in the main office, head office in just outside Tokyo City, a place called Chiba, or near Chiba. And so I moved there in, what year was that? 2005, I think it was. So I stayed there for 8 months, and I decided that was not the future for me. I didn't like how the company treated their employees. For instance, I had to work weekends, and a lot of my shifts started at 2 a.m. or 4 a.m. in the morning, and I was not financially compensated for that. They did pay for my accommodation, but once my visa came in, I would have had to pay for my accommodation. I just did not like how they treated employees. So I decided to leave there in about June or July 2006. And as soon as I came back to Australia, I decided to apply to the Bureau of Meteorology. So I've been with the Bureau of Meteorology for 14 years now. So I started there in 2007, and one of the things I really liked about the Bureau of Meteorology was this public, or serving the public. So we are a public service, and I do believe that we do add good value to the public, and I think we've lost sight of that in recent years. I do like the work, that's the main thing. I do like the shifts, so I am a shift worker, so I love working as long as possible. So I love 12-hour shifts. I love the fact that we have 4 shifts on, 4 shifts off, and 2 of those shifts are day shifts, 2 of those shifts are night shifts. So I love that aspect of the work. I don't like what's happening now. I think we're becoming more focused on automating the forecasting process, and you might have noticed a massive decrease in the quality of forecast in recent times. And the whole reason you're seeing a decrease in the quality is because of the fact that we're taking the human element out of the forecast and making just the computer make all the decisions. And I believe this is the wrong path to go down, particularly in the tropics. It might work in the southern states, but when you go to the tropics, relying on computers and computer modeling is a massive mistake. And we can see that all the time, every single day almost in the tropics. But because most of the management come from Melbourne, they don't actually understand that. And that's a major negative about where we're heading right now with the Bureau of Meteorology. And I believe the main reason a lot of us go to the Bureau of Meteorology is to serve the public, but it's all about money now. Everything's about money, and we're becoming less focused on the public and trying to get all those companies that might give us a little bit more money, going back to the government, getting more money from the government, that sort of thing, where we're losing focus of our main purpose. So that's the end of my rant on the Bureau of Meteorology. Every single shift I tend to go on a little bit of a rant when I'm working there. So how did I get into investing? Well, it's actually not a very easy answer because I've always been interested in investing. And it all starts with the numbers. So I love numbers, and numbers are inherent in investing. In fact, when I worked at the CBA, I was actually doing some sort of course with the Securities Institute. I'm not even sure they're in existence now. They could have been bought out by Kaplan or something, I'm not sure. So the end goal of doing that course was to get in some sort of investing field or whatnot. But instead of finishing that course, I ended up going overseas and going down a completely different path with atmospheric science and meteorology. So the interest was always there. But what happened as I got into around 2009, 2010, had this money coming in and I bought a house. And what can I do with this leftover money? And I decided I needed to invest it because the best way to make money is to invest, particularly in equities. Now, Australians are obsessed with buying properties. Properties is not for me simply because it's very liquid. If I need the money quickly, I can't sell the house quickly. So equities would be a much better thing for me, in my opinion. Plus, you get better returns in equities in the stock market. So that's another reason I prefer to invest in the stock market. So everything pointed to me becoming interested in investing just because of my personality, because of my interests. It led me down into the investing world. And over the last 10, 12 years, the way I've invested has really evolved over time. So I think one of the more pertinent questions is, instead of asking how or why I got into investing, would be to say why YouTube videos. Because if you know anything about me before I started doing videos, would be this is the last thing you would think that I would do, because I hate putting myself in front of any sort of camera. Even though at the Bureau of Meteorology, on occasion, I did have to put myself in front of a camera. In fact, the other day, I put myself in front of a camera. And this all started in early 2020, before COVID-19 financial panic, when I had enough money in my investments to pay off my mortgage. Now, at that point in time, I realized the stock market was significantly overvalued, and expected returns over the next 5 or 10 years was going to be lower than my mortgage rate. So I thought it'd be more financially prudent to pay off my mortgage, and then if we get any sort of correction in the market, I can take the offset account and then put that money back into the stock market. And actually it happened a few months later. Now, when I paid off my mortgage, I was surprised with how my mindset significantly changed. It was a sudden shift in priorities. So before I paid off my mortgage, money was more important than time. And then all of a sudden, time became way more important than money. And so my mind completely, the way I viewed the world completely changed. Also, what happened was I went through this, and going through this bout of self-improvement. So I decided, well, I've got this time now. Time is more important. What can I work on myself to improve? So I decided to work on my 2 biggest weaknesses. So I came to the realization my 2 biggest weaknesses that I could work on were a lack of self-patience and persistence. So this was the major reason why I decided not to do a PhD. And it's good to know your biggest weaknesses. And the weird thing about this weakness is I'm very patient with other people. In fact, I was a tutor and a teacher in the past, and my amount of patience I have with other people is actually quite high. But when I'm starting to learn something new, I want to be good at that straight away. But sometimes you have to be persistent and you have to be patient when you're learning something new, like a musical instrument or even a language. And the second thing I really wanted to work on was my reluctance of being in front of a camera. So what did I do to fix these 2 biggest weaknesses? So a few years ago, I bought this 5,000 jigsaw puzzle called the Tower of Babylon. Not sure why I bought this. Now, I bought some other puzzles at the time, 1,000, 2,000 piece jigsaw puzzle. And I saw this and I went, this could be a good self-patience and persistence exercise to do and complete this 5,000 piece jigsaw puzzle. Now, at the time, I thought it would only take me a few months. It did not. It took me about 9 months to complete, which is fairly strange because other puzzles, like a 1,000 piece jigsaw puzzle, might only take a week or so. This took 8 or 9 months, I forget how long. It took a long time. It was not an easy jigsaw puzzle. A few times during this process, I thought I'm just going to give up, but I just went, no, 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 persist, 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 persist. Now, unfortunately, the dogs did get into the closed off area and they did eat 2 pieces. And you can maybe find these 2 pieces if you look very close, actually 3 pieces, and you might find these 3 pieces if you look very closely. But I eventually finished it, and when I finished it, it was the greatest, one of the greatest points in my life, because it had taught me persistence. Maybe not self-patience, but definitely persistence. So I'm very happy I did this, and I'm not going to do this again. So how did I work on my second weakness? It took a little bit of more time to work on this, and the solution was fairly obvious, and it was to do some videos, YouTube videos, and I really had to work myself up to getting to this point. And then at one night, July 22nd, 2020, I put my foot down and just decided I had to do it at that point in time. If I don't do it now, I'll never do it. So I really made myself do this initial video. So July 22nd, 2020, I did a video that I entitled "The End of the World is Nigh." I have intentionally put myself on video. This video went for 2 minutes and 55 seconds, 111 views. So this is on one of my other channels. So have a look for it if you really want to see how I am on my very first video. Now, the evolution over the last 8 months since I did this very first video has been extraordinary. And this solution has worked a treat. So when I did this first video and a few videos after this, I would always cringe when I looked at myself on video and heard myself speech that, that just, do I really sound like that? Do I really look like that? Now, when I see myself on video, hear myself speak, it's all natural. I don't cringe, it's all natural, and I'm just so thankful that this has worked a treat. I'm becoming more comfortable just talking on video, speaking my mind, that sort of thing. So I really highly recommend doing this sort of thing if you're uncomfortable in putting yourself on camera. I do know the parents of really shy children, put them in acting classes, put them on stage, that sort of thing, for them to overcome their shyness. And I do know that actually does work, because a lot of famous actors are only acting because that's what their parents did. So that's all I got for this initial video on Q&A with Kneppy Invests. If you do have any comments or any questions or requests, make sure you leave it in this comment section of this video, and any future Q&A videos, I'll use the questions and requests from the comment section in this video as sort of a base for those future videos. So don't leave any requests or questions in other videos, leave it in this video. So that's all for this video. Have a good day. Bye.